Thank you,
All
Jackie.
right, shall I just dive in then?
Yes.
So hi everybody. Good morning from me. I know it's not morning for everybody, but I have not yet found what the right thing to say is to a collection of people from a totally diverse number of time zones. So I'm joining you from Inverness in the Scottish Highlands, and we've got a very grey morning today, but this is going to brighten up my day. So yeah, what I would love to do is to kind of talk a little bit about the breath, how it helped me in my recovery, and the work that I do now to help people who are still on their recovery journey with appropriate breath work for their recovery. Because this was one of the things that I found was that, there's a million different types of breath work, and they're not, every type of breath work has its place, but many of them do not have their place in recovery from conditions like long COVID, ME/CFS, and these kind of cohort of conditions. So it's understanding what our breath is doing in the role, and how to tailor the right exercise to the right time. Um, and that is definitely um, a journey in itself. So, as Lolita so kindly said, I also host the LongCovid podcast, which was something that I started on my own recovery journey. And it's a collection of, well, it's kind of changed over the years. It started off being a very kind of medical dive. And then as I started to get better and find things that helped me, it has definitely kind of evolved over the years. But basically, what I like to do is to focus on what we can do, because when we are so unwell, there is a million, everything feels like something that we can't do. However, there are things that we can, even if they're really, really small. And the small things I think are often the most important. So, what I'll try and do before we finish is drop a whole lot of links for you, and I can send them over to Lolita afterwards as well, if you want to access things like the podcast and any resources that I mention. So I will try and make sure that you get all of them, because I know some people like to copy things out of the chat, but that doesn't work for everybody. So yeah, my I had my own recovery journey. I got long COVID back in 2020, and it took me about 3.5 years to fully recover. And I have now been fully better for almost 3 years. So I'm almost approached that point where I have been well for as long as I was ill. I think that point will come at the end of the year, towards the end of the year, and it's it's quite stressful. um, but yeah, I think one of the things that helped me the most was the breath. And that was why I felt that I had to do what I needed to do. So I used to work as a music teacher. I was working in a lot of different schools, doing a lot of commuting, living a very overly, as it turned out, full life, which I imagine many people can relate to. Um, and it just it didn't light me up. I didn't realize at the time, but it did not, make me feel fulfilled. I didn't feel like I was loving my work. And I was working hard, playing hard, and, just setting myself up, basically, as it turns out. So when, for me, the trigger was COVID, came along, it was kind of like, as people often describe, the match to the sort of gasoline kind of thing, and it went up. So I went through the kind of pushing through um, way of dealing with this denial. This can't possibly be happening to me. I'm sure it'll all be fine. I'm just going to do exactly what I've always done and push my way through this. And because I'm very, very stubborn, I tried this for quite a long time. And I also wasn't getting any useful help either. This was sort of 2020, and You may remember the kind of medical system chaos going on at that time. But I didn't get any useful help. The help that I did get was probably not helpful. um, and it took me about a year before I met somebody who suggested breath work for long COVID. And I thought, that sounds a bit unlikely. What do you mean that just by breathing it can help you? But by this point, I felt so desperate that, everything I'd been trying hadn't worked. What do you mean pushing through and denying that anything was going wrong wasn't working? So I signed up for these breath classes with this guy who lived the other end of the UK. And he started to teach me about the breath. And this guy, even though actually he made a lot of things worse, he changed my life because he introduced me to the breath. He taught me a lot about the kind of science behind it, which I needed to understand some of in order to be able to actually commit to putting it into practice. And I definitely fall into the category of wanting to know more than I need to. But I need, for me, I need to understand enough to commit, right? So he taught me about, the role of the breaths, efficiency in the body, how every single breath that we breathe can either make us function well or completely hinder our function. And that most of this is unconscious, or certainly it's unconscious until we make it conscious. And so a lot of what he taught me was actually becoming conscious of my breath. What he did not have is experience of, that lived experience. So he was coming in up here where I was down here. And a lot of the things that he taught me to do actually made me a lot worse. But because I'm stubborn, I kept trying and it kept making me worse. But over time, I started to DIY it myself. So I started to learn, okay, well, this exercise obviously works, but it's working far too well. So I need to make this work for me. And I got much better at working out what worked when. And as I was doing all this work, my function of my breath started to increase, which meant that, that feeling when you get an illness like this and your body feels like total chaos, like everything is wrong. You have a million different symptoms. It's totally chaotic. You're probably terrified. I certainly was. And you just don't know what to do. You're completely overwhelmed by the situation, and you've possibly got tons of medical tests coming out your ears. Or maybe you haven't. I didn't. But, there's this utter sense of chaos. And what the breath did for me was, because it helped to bring my breath back to a slightly more functional level, it allowed me to see the wood for the trees. So there was still a lot of chaos going on in my body. I still felt terrible. I still couldn't do a lot of things. I was still crashing and burning all the time. But I felt like I had just a little measure of control. And that felt incredibly empowering. And then over time, things started, not in a useful linear way, but things did over time start to feel slightly better. And then that led me on to other things that were able to help me. So the other things that I found very helpful were things like yoga nidra, which for those of you who haven't experienced it, is basically like a sort of meditation. You lie down and you don't have to do anything. And yoga nidra and sort of very gentle yoga and sort of meditation and all of those sorts of things are amazing. I have a very, very busy mind. I'm one of these people that's like going at a million miles an hour in my head all the time. And, it's not fun to physically rest your body, but it's very easy in that you either do or you don't do. You lie on the sofa and you're resting your body. But resting your mind, for me, was something I had never even thought of. And certainly once I did think of it, it was something that felt completely impossible. So when I was introduced to things like yoga nidra, I thought, this is the answer. This is going to save me. This is going to, everything's going to be great. But because my breath was so dysfunctional, I would lie down and think, right, I'm going to do my yoga nidra. And I would, start trying to do all the things that the instructions were telling me, focus your attention here and do this there and relax your body and empty your mind. And my mind was going like that. And my breath was going really fast. And it was impossible for me to get into that kind of like Zen state that is supposed to happen when you do yoga nidra. So by allowing my breath, by doing the breath work, starting to bring my breath back to this slightly more functional place, not only was I allowing my body to work much more efficiently, but I also was then able to get into a slightly calmer state with things like the yoga nidra, allowing my mind to just slow down a little bit. I don't think I've ever experienced that true Zen, but it comes down a bit to the point where I feel like I've got a bit of breathing space, pardon the pun, in my head. So that the breath work allowed me to access this slightly calmer state in my mind, which again felt like it absolutely changed my world because I'd never experienced any breathing space in my head in my entire life, I don't think. So that was totally life changing. And then I sort of puttered along for a long time, up and down. And, I found lots of other things that I found helpful. Nothing that was like earth shattering, but lots of things that really were helpful. Things like journaling when intense emotions came up and getting outside and sort of very gentle movement. I was still definitely doing too much and crashing and burning, but I was getting much better at listening to my body. When can I do things? When can I not? Starting a podcast, as it turns out, is quite a lot of work. But what it did give me was a sense of connection. And that was something that I very much felt like was lacking because, when something like this happens, your world falls apart. All your friends, or most of your friends, certainly, they don't understand you. Some of them are helpful, some of them are not. Even if they do want to help, family can be a double-edged sword. I had a very supportive partner, but even he didn't know what to do and I didn't know what to ask him for. And he was very hit and miss with getting it right. And that wasn't his fault. It wasn't mine either. But, that sense of isolation. So I think it was around about 2 years in, 2 and a bit years in. The same guy, actually, as it turns out, that had started to teach me to breathe, said, "Oh, you should try cold water." And I said, "No, thank you. That sounds awful. I like to be on top of the mountain, not in the lake. I don't want to do that. No, thank you." But there was something about it that sort of sat in the back of my mind. And I thought, well, things have been going a bit better. I am feeling a bit better. I am able to do a little bit more. I'm still quite ill, but, things have definitely shifted. But I felt like I got stuck. So I'd sort of had those shifts and then plateaued, and I'd had more shifts and then plateaued. And I'd got stuck at this point, which I imagine some of you might be familiar with, that sort of like, all the things that I were doing aren't, they're not really shifting a gear anymore. So I thought, what have I got to lose? So I'm very lucky. I have Loch Ness just down the road. And I went down there and got into the water very, very slowly. My goodness, it was painful. And I remember being up to my neck. Oh, I'll have to see if I can find the picture. It's ridiculous. Got up to my neck and, it was very cold. It was I think it was either the end of April, beginning of May. So a few weeks on from now. So the air temperature here in Scotland is starting to warm up. The water's warming up a little bit, but it's still pretty chilly. Loch Ness at this time of year is about 8 or 9 degrees, I think, approximately. Maybe 10 if you're lucky. Probably not though. And I was in the water for about 30 seconds. Said to my partner, take the picture, take the picture. I'm never getting in here again. Take the picture. Because, when Loch Ness is beautiful, it's me in my little pink bubble hat, water up to here. This is never happening again. Get the photo. So I got out, got my clothes back on, um, and I felt alive. Like I felt more alive, I think, than I had felt in years. And I thought, okay, great. Maybe I will go back in. And I did. And ever since I started, I have been in that water at least 2 or 3 times a week. And it's something that I still do. I do it in a different way now, but I still do it. And it's something that I have discovered that I absolutely love. And at the time, I didn't really overthink it. I just did it. And it was amazing. The impacts didn't last. So I went and got in again. And then I felt like I'd been plugged in again. And then it didn't last. So over time, the effects did start to last longer. So I didn't, yeah, I'm an overthinker, but I didn't really overthink this too much. I just kept doing it because it was working. And it wasn't until, you know, much more recently where I was able to look back on this and think, once I started working professionally in this space, why did that work? Because so many people talk about cold water and how they tried it and it didn't help them. Why did it help me? And I said I'm an overthinker. So I was certainly overthinking it by this point, and I wanted to know why. And I think the reason was I did things in the right order for me. And that's not to say it's the right order for everyone, but it was the right order for me. I used the breath to give myself that foundation. So it gave me that kind of foundation of functional breathing. It started to bring my nervous system back to a little bit more of a sense of calm. It allowed me exercises that I could use in the moment when things started getting a bit out of control to help to bring me back. It allowed me to access that yoga nidra, which brought me a little bit of kind of mental calm. It allowed me to move a little bit more because my body was being more efficient in the way it was breathing. Therefore, I was able to I had more free energy for other things. And all of this had kind of given me more resilience. Because when you get into cold water, it's a pretty big stressor. So you have to have enough resilience that you can handle the stress up to stress down. So for me, completely by chance, I timed it right. But also, so much of that comes from the breath, because when we get into cold water, for example, our natural reaction is for the breath to speed up. We get that. And because I had spent 2 years up to that point doing breath work, often inappropriate breath work, but I had understanding about it that I didn't really understand I had, I was able to control my breath as I went in. And I think that was what was so crucial, was that I had the resilience to withstand that. I was able to control my breath. And also I didn't fall into the trap of staying in too long, which a lot of people do. I've got here now, I'm going to make it worth it. I'm going to stay in for 10 minutes. Whereas actually we get the maximum benefits about 90 seconds. After that, we just get colder and it takes this energy to warm back up again. So I think a lot of this I had kind of, I don't know, I must have known on some level, or I must have really started to tune into my body, I think, by that point, which is something that I never had before. So for me, I think, the breath work gave me that first thing. It was the first thing that helped me, even though it kind of hindered me at times as well. But it really helped me, which gave me partly the confidence that there was something that would help me to feel slightly better. Because up until that point, I hadn't found anything. I'd done stuff that I shouldn't have done it and it made me feel worse. And I'd had days where I felt slightly better, but I didn't know why. And then when I started finding these breathing exercises, I did start having tools that I could use. So that was hugely kind of empowering and confidence building. And I thought, well, if I can improve a little bit, surely I can get better. That kind of made sense to me. If I can get a little bit better, I can get a lot better. And I did. So that breath gave me that first thing, and it gave me that foundation that I built the rest of my recovery on. Because everything from then on, it came back to that foundation that I had built the breath on. And it's something that I still do now. So 3 years in, I start every day with my breath practice. Actually, that's a lie. I had a lie in this morning. I have not yet done my breath practice, so I will do it after I finish speaking to you. But I do my breath practice every day. Do as I say, not as I do, guys. Start my day with that breath practice. It's something that I'm aware of in every part of my day. So when I am getting stressed because I've got a million emails to answer, okay, let's come back to the breath. Let's take a few breaths. Okay, now I can handle all those emails that are difficult. Now I can go and support that client that really needs me. Now I can lead this group that I know could be really challenging, and I'm able to be present for that. So it's something that really helps me in my work. It's something that supports my sleep. It's something that supports the way that I now exercise. And I was able, because I started from this base of, very, very low activity, I was able to build up my breath over time as I was able to regain capacity. And I'm now marathon training through functional breath. Well, I certainly was until I pulled all the tendons in my foot. But anyway, that is an entirely different story. So yeah, don't do this at home, guys. It hurts. So I guess what I'd love to do is answer any questions that you have, because I could sit here and talk all day, but I think what's much more relevant is, do you guys have questions? And if you don't, I can keep talking. But if there is anything that you would like to know, then I'm super happy to try and answer that. Um,
I'd like to know, Jackie, at
mm,
different stages from bedbound to getting there, whether you advocate different sorts of breath work.
Thank you, Jackie.
yeah, yeah, that's a really good question. And I think
Can I
yes
can
and
I
no.
just interrupt for a minute? Can I just
Mm,
interrupt for a second? Sorry, guys. We've just got a really bad connection here, so I apologize for that. I'm not sure what's happening. Um, Hopefully it will. I'm not sure whether it'll improve. I don't know whether it's my end or something else, but we'll just keep going and hopefully everything's okay. So my apologies for that. Okay, go
yeah, you
ahead.
keep freezing. So hopefully it's just your end. Um, yeah, let's talk specific breathing at well, not specific, but yeah, what was Claire asking? Different types of breathing for different stages of recovery. Yes. So what the way that I teach this, we have three kind of different categories of exercise. One is the first is dysfunctional breathing. So we hear a lot about dysfunctional breathing, and basically dysfunctional breathing is anything that isn't functional. It's a lot of different things. The two most common forms of dysfunctional breathing are overbreathing. So what you might hear is hyperventilation, mouth breathing, upper chest breathing, fast, shallow breathing. So that's your kind of overbreathing. And that's the most common. But what we also see a surprising amount of is sort of underbreathing. And what I often call that kind of like accidental breath holding. So where you are sort of, maybe you're lying down and you just sort of forget to breathe, which sounds completely ridiculous unless you've experienced it, at which point it is very, very real. So you just sort of stop breathing. And then obviously you start breathing again, and you might get that kind of, oh. So which is pretty unsettling. And these two dysfunctional breathing patterns are the ones that we find the most common. And they almost always correlate to nervous system states. So the overbreathing is very much a fight-flight response, danger, run away, you got to fight, the breath is speeding up to facilitate that. And the underbreathing is very much a shutdown response. So, the body has shut down to protect us, we've gone into survival mode, we've gone into low power mode, and that includes the breathing. We ain't got the energy to breathe. So we stop. But of course, we can't stop breathing. So we get that kind of thing, and then we go back to normal. So these are kind of two ends of the spectrum, and it is completely possible that you experience both of them as you move through different states in your nervous system. So they're the most kind of common forms of dysfunctional breathing. And what is really important is we start to move back towards functional breathing. And functional breathing is through the nose. It's into the diaphragm, the belly, basically. It's what you might have heard called belly breathing. And the third part of functional breathing is, we're taught that it's called slow, but what I prefer is metabolically appropriate. So if you are at rest, it is pretty slow. Whereas if you are bouncing on a trampoline, it's going to be much faster. And obviously everything kind of in between. So appropriate kind of speed to the metabolic requirements of what your body is doing. So moving back towards functional breathing is what we want to achieve. However, this is a process. Some people are able to do some of this reasonably quickly. Some people take a lot longer. I've had people who have taken the whole 12 sessions of the course that I teach, and, they're still working to get into their diaphragm. So everyone has to go at the pace that is appropriate for them, taking into account how much they can tolerate, the muscles, the biochemistry, their nervous system, how much instruction they're able to tolerate. So I think the really important thing is to be met exactly where you are. And if someone is suggesting a breathing exercise to you that doesn't feel good, then don't do it. So the number one rule is, if it doesn't feel good, it's not doing you good. So I'm going to come out and say things like Wim Hof, don't even go there. Wim Hof is very upregulating, and it's got its place, but it's not here. So it might be something to use way down the line. Like I said, with the cold water for me, helped me to stress up to stress down, but because I did it at the right time. Wim Hof, I would actually say, put that even further down the line than cold water, potentially. Not that I'm giving advice on cold water, I should make that clear. So coming back to the breath, restoring functional breathing, but at a pace that is comfortable for you. So it might be 1 diaphragm breath a day. And then the next week, it might be 2 diaphragm breaths a day. And then 3 diaphragm breaths a day. Whereas some people can move a lot quicker. So restoring that functional breath, that is the kind of foundation. Then the next kind of category of exercises is what I just call down-regulating, kind of gentle stuff, stuff being a technical term. And this is stuff like, it might be humming, it might be extending your exhale. Diaphragm breathing fits here as well, because it is a nice, gentle down-regulating breath exercise. So left nostril breathing might fit into this category as well. So this is the exercises that, gentle, down-regulating. And then the third category are what I call emergency exercises. And these are the ones for when everything feels like it's spiraling out of control. So, you're feeling very activated, you may be feeling anxious, panicked, everything's going really, really fast. We're in that fight-flight state. And if anyone has ever had the experience where someone said, oh, just calm down, or just slow your breath down, and you've ever felt like you wanted to hit them, yeah. That's exactly the scenario that I'm describing here. And in that moment, yes, you do want to calm down. And yes, you do want to slow your breath down. But there's no just. And if you were to try and breathe into your diaphragm when you're feeling really, really activated, what you will probably do is actually make yourself feel worse. You'll bring on all that air hunger. You'll struggle to get into your diaphragm. And yeah, it probably won't make you feel better in that moment. So these kind of emergency exercises are sort of biohacks. I call them breathing biohacks because they're helping to slow our breath down, but there's no just here. So there's those kind of three categories of exercises. And the work here is partly learning the exercise, but so much more of it is learning our own body. So which exercise works for me in which situation? So where am I in my nervous system? What do I need? But also, what are the signs that my body gives me that shows how much or how little to do this exercise? And we should always start with the smallest amount. We ease ourselves in, and then that might be where we're at. Or we might be able to increase a little bit as the body relaxes. And that's something we have to learn for ourselves because our bodies are very individual. And I do not know exactly what you're feeling in your body in any given moment. I can describe how it feels to me and how it might look to you and the signs to look out for. But you are the only person that can know how that feels. So anyone who tells you they know what you're feeling in your body is wrong. It's guiding you to learn that for yourself. And I think that is the most important thing that we can learn on this journey, right? Is to listen and to interpret the signals that our body is giving us. And that is exactly what we do with the breath. You know, if I'm doing diaphragm breathing, I need to ease that in if I'm feeling quite stressed. If I'm feeling very fatigued, then, trying to take huge, big breaths is going to be too much for me. If I'm feeling very, very shut down, humming is probably too much because I'm creating sound. That's quite energetic. So, humming is a wonderful exercise. But if you're deep in a shutdown, probably not. But in the same, as I said, with the emergency exercises, if you are super activated, all the alarm bells are ringing, breathing through your left nostril, that's not going to cut it in that moment. So, it's really starting to understand. And I think for me, everything comes back to breath awareness. What is going on in your breath in this moment? What's showing up here? Can I give that space? Can I sit with that and actually just allow it to be? Because sometimes it's allowing rather than controlling. And anyone else here a control freak? I'm going to put my hand up to that one. Definitely like to be in control. And actually, sometimes it's saying, I'm not in control here. I'm going to allow my breath space. I am feeling very stressed. So actually, I need to close my eyes and lie on the floor and give myself 5 minutes just to let all that go without trying to control my breath, because often that sense of danger comes from trying too hard to control. And we don't feel safe if we're feeling controlled. We're feeling that kind of I'm trying to be shut in a box kind of thing. So sometimes it is just allowing. And sometimes it is meeting our needs where we are and stepping in with the appropriate exercise. So we can't talk through everything today because there just isn't the time. And but there's lots of different exercises. I think understanding what each one does is useful. But most importantly, is this exercise making me feel better? And if it isn't, then do you need less of it? Do you need more of it? It's usually less, but sometimes more. Or actually, is it not the right exercise for this moment? And, do you actually need to give yourself some space or to do a different exercise? So I think,
And
rather than
Jackie,
there being, sorry.
yeah, Jackie, just to interrupt you there, Shan's got her hand raised. And also what I wanted to say too is when I started, what I found was that once you start a breath practice, that's when your body starts to really speak to you. That's when you're more, you become more focused on your breath. You become more focused on and noticing more. So it really is just making a start. Start and
Yeah,
trust yourself, and like you said, start off very gently, slowly, and and then you'll find that you'll just start noticing more and more things that you've never
yeah,
noticed before. Okay,
absolutely.
so Shan, did you want
Yeah, there's a
to ask a
hand up.
question?
Yeah, do you want to hop in?
Hi. You've
Hello.
actually answered quite a lot of my question. But I was just wondering, so I have POTS and ME, and I really struggle with things like alternating nostrils or any kind of breath work where you're holding the breath. And so like you've kind of answered this in a sense that I don't
Okay,
think that's
don't
the
do
right breath work for me.
it.
But I'm also quite new to neuroplasticity. And when I was speaking with a like long COVID dietitian, she was kind of explaining, well, if you have POTS and the blood's like not going up to your brain efficiently, they're like, of course, like holding your breath is gonna like not be great. But from a neuroplasticity, sorry, perspective, I'm trying to like I guess like send like safety signals to my brain and like not push myself to do things, but just feel safe to do it. And I guess yeah, from your perspective, how do you balance when it comes to breath work, knowing okay, like this actually isn't good, maybe from a physiological perspective, or is this something that we can kind of retrain ourselves to do? And yeah, I don't know if that makes sense, but I just feel so perplexed by it.
Yeah, and I think, it's okay to feel perplexed by it because it's a huge field. And someone says, oh, do some breath work, that'll help you. And you sort of Google breath work and whoa, where do I start? We get that total overwhelm and we either don't do it or we pick the first thing that comes up, and it turns out that the first thing that comes up is something like Wim Hof, perhaps, and is the wrong thing. So yeah, thank you for asking that. I think yeah, if it doesn't feel good, it's not doing you good. So what are the signs that your body gives you that suggest that things feel good? So saliva is always a good one to look out for. Saliva is a sign that the body is moving into that rest and digest, that the body is relaxing, that it likes what you're doing. So things like saliva, tummy rumbles, same thing. It's that kind of preparing for digestion without wanting to be too graphic on a Sunday morning. Um, that sense of calm, maybe relaxing, we feel tension releasing a little bit. If you have a busy mind, maybe it's slowing down by 1%. The monkey with the cymbals is just a little bit quieter. So what are the signs for you that show that your body is starting to move into that kind of rest and digest? About breath holds, it's worth just mentioning that because, again, you Google breath work, the two things that are the most likely to come up, I think, are Wim Hof. We've already kicked that one into touch, and things like breath holds and possibly cadence breathing. Cadence breathing is the one that goes in for 4, out for 6, and it's one that has research papers written on it. It's a great breath. However, if it's a breath that is too hard for you in the moment, then rather than being a great breath, it is another wrong breath. So it's got to feel good. So if you want to do something like that, do it at a level that feels good. Go in for 2, out for 3. And if you don't like numbers, don't use them. Use the visualization, use sound, use something else. So that's the one that comes up. And yeah, and breath holds, I'm not going to overwhelm you with science because it's Sunday. But breath holds do increase our circulation if they're done right. They do increase our oxygenation, they do increase our carbon dioxide tolerance, and they can be a very useful tool. However, if we hold our breath, it puts stress on the body. If we put stress on a body that is already stressed, we're going to activate further. So breath holds can, if you want to do breath holds, make sure they're appropriate breath holds. And I would say appropriate breath hold is probably like 1 second. That 1 second, 2 second breath hold might just give you enough without it being too much. So we're going for that kind of Goldilocks thing. And one of the exercises I teach for the emergency exercises is one that we call many small breath holds. And it is literally that. It's a series of many small breath holds. So we're in that activated state. By doing those teeny tiny little breath holds, we can help to increase the oxygenation to our brain, which starts to bring down that activation, starts to slow our breath down, brings us back to safety. So it's all about those signals of safety. It's just how we do them in each moment. So I think coming back to the question that Claire asked about different breath work for different times, it's coming back to that. It's that signals of safety. What is going to make my body feel safe right now? And if breathing into your diaphragm is going to give you air hunger, then that doesn't feel safe. If you're doing a breath hold, that is making you extra stressed because it's putting that biochemical load on your body. That's not going to feel safe. So we want to do it really, really gradually. That the shifts have to happen slowly. If we try to do anything too big or too fast, the body will shut us down. So what is like 1%? Doing 1%, 1%, 1%, and listening. Does this feel good? Does this feel too much? And remember that we're human. So we will probably get it wrong. There will be times where we pair an inappropriate breath practice to how we're feeling. And if we listen to the body and the body goes, Jackie, I'm not sure this is the right one for today, we can notice really quickly and go, oh, okay, yeah, no, I'm not feeling this today. Let's do something else. Rather than powering on through and, being old me, oh, well, it's not working. I just need to try harder. So it's not a case of no pain, no gain. It's actually kind of the opposite to that. What feels good in this moment. And that will change over time as well. So as your breath becomes more functional, you will find that you have capacity to try different things. So if you haven't used your diaphragm in like 5 years, diaphragm breathing will probably feel challenging to start with. So you'll have to go very, very, very gently. But as diaphragm breathing becomes much more easy for you over time, you'll find that it feels super relaxing. Oh, I love diaphragm breathing. There was a question in the chat about sleep, breathing before sleep. So if diaphragm breathing feels very challenging for you, then it's not going to help you get to sleep. You want something much calmer. Maybe you want simple nose breathing. Maybe you want to count your breaths in and out, 10, in and out, 9, count them down. We used to get told to count sheep. I prefer to count my breaths, but count whatever you want. So and over time, as your breathing becomes more functional, you might then find that diaphragm breathing is the perfect thing to get you to sleep because it feels really easy now. So it's coming back to what is, it's very, very personal for each individual person. And I think, it's meeting ourselves where we are. So I'm just looking at the chat. I've noticed that I hold my breath a lot. How can I address this? Noticing that awareness is the first step. Each time you notice yourself not breathing or holding your breath, restore your breath. And over time, that pattern will start to happen. But gently, being super gentle. And I think, the other thing, one of the things when Lolita and I spoke a couple of weeks ago, wasn't it? I think one of the things that came to me so strongly from your story was self-compassion. And that's something I've always struggled with because everything's always my fault and I could do better. And again, I think this is something that a lot of us find really challenging. And remembering that, it's okay to get things wrong. It's okay to not be firing at 100% all the time. We don't always have to be pushing as hard as we possibly can. Actually, sometimes it's sitting back and allowing and giving ourselves space to be angry or upset or whatever it is that we're feeling, and allowing the breath to kind of support us in that. So, yeah.
I found that I would choose, I think I had maybe about 4 different breathwork exercises that I would use, and I would practice those, see how they felt in my body, and practice them at different times, when the symptoms Mostly I did, and this was going to be a question I was going to ask you. Mostly how I used it was when I actually had a symptom that was quite pronounced, and I found that um, I'd used one and that wouldn't quite simmer things down. So then I'd try a different one. And I was doing that throughout the whole time, like, and then I worked out for myself which one worked when. And so what I found was if you have three or four in your tool bag and you practice
Yeah.
those, get really comfortable with them, get good at practicing them, and when you practice them, and then you can just kind of pull one out when you need it. I'm not sure if that was a good thing to do or not, Jackie, but that worked for me.
Yeah, I think having, it's that difference between what's Deb Dana's triangle? Anyway, one of the things we need for safety is choice, but it's
Yes,
appropriate choice. So if we have not
yes.
enough choice, then that doesn't feel safe because we feel like we're forced into
Mm,
whatever it is. And
mm,
if we have too much choice, then we feel overwhelmed, which again
that's
doesn't feel
right.
safe. It's too much, too much. And where that appropriate level of choice is sits differently for everyone. But I think, with breath practices, it's having enough different ones that do enough different things for enough different situations that
Mm,
wherever a situation we're in, you take it off the shelf. I need that one today. I need that one in this moment. I need that one. But, it's if you walk up to your, cupboard of breathing exercises and there's so many there, I don't know which one. Do I want the pink one or the red one or the orange one? It's too much. We don't know what to do. So,
yes.
try plenty out. Find out which ones work the best for you, which ones resonate the best with you, and put them on a list. Write them down because when we're in that activated state or that shutdown state, we don't have the kind of cognitive capacity to make those decisions for us. So write them down. And then when you're in whatever state, activation, shutdown, doctor surgery, whatever it is, you know what you're doing. I'm going to try that one. That's the one that's going to work for me. And if it doesn't work, you've got a backup as well. So it's that, and enough, isn't it? Enough is a concept that I struggle with. I don't really realize the idea of enough until I am so far across the line. But I think it's a learning what is enough, and they will change over time as well. As your body changes, your needs will change. So a breathing exercise that at the moment feels totally out of reach is something that might be your new best friend in a couple of weeks. In the chat, yeah, diaphragm breathing. If you struggle with this, go really gently. Do one a day. Do it lying down. Much easier to diaphragm breathe lying down for most people because we've taken the um, the stress out of sitting up. Sitting up is really energetic. So lie yourself down, put your hand on your belly, and gently encourage that breath. And if it starts to make you feel worse, if it starts to make you feel tired, take a break. So it might be doing one or two and then coming back to it later or tomorrow. The diaphragm's a muscle. So, with muscle training, we got to go gently. So it comes back to being kind to ourselves, doesn't it? I think.
Yes.
And yeah, progressive muscle relaxation, absolutely. Yeah, can be really helpful. Because if we're very tense in our body, then our diaphragm, which is a muscle, is also going to be tense and is going to struggle to move freely. So, how can we bring as much relaxation into the body as we can? We're not going for 100%. I don't think anyone's ever been 100% relaxed, but bring in as much relaxation as you can. And a lot of that lying down is going to help. Um, so,
Can you see
yeah,
Helen's question there?
yes. What gentle practice is a good place to start? Yeah. So, I mean, should we put some of this into practice?
Yes,
Should we
that's what I
do
was
some
going to just
breathing?
ask. Mm,
Because I would love to sit here and answer more questions, but it might be more useful to just try. And what I will also do is make sure that you have links to my Insight Timer profile, which has got like a million, well, it's not got a million, I'm over exaggerating, but it's got a lot of different breathing practices, meditations, things like that as well. So I'll make sure that that's shared with you.
Thank you, Jackie.
So absolutely. Can someone who's bedbound manage your course? Yeah, you can join whatever. You know, we've had people who come along off camera in bed, and we've had people who come along and join for 10 minutes and then do the rest of the class on catch up. So yeah, Insight Timer is free. It's a free app. All my tracks, I think all of my tracks are free. Certainly 95% of them are free. So you do not have to pay for Insight Timer. It was something that I used a lot in my own recovery, and it's absolutely amazing. So yeah, cool. We're going to run slightly over time. Is that okay, Lita?
Yes, yes. Yep. Just
Um,
feel free to leave if you need to, anyone, and it'll be recorded and I'll have it available soon.
yeah, I'm not very good at timekeeping. Something I'm working on. But as you said, yes, if anyone needs to head off, you can come back to this if it helps you. So yeah, let's take a moment and get ourselves into whatever is the most comfortable position for you right now. So if you have space to lie yourself down, that might be helpful. If you want to go off camera, that's totally fine. I find a lot of people do that. They're quite happy to be on camera, but when we're doing a breathing practice, they feel a lot more comfortable lying down and closing their eyes if they're off camera. So you're welcome to do that. I won't take it personally, I promise. And yeah, just take a moment to settle yourself. If you are remaining seated, I'd recommend some back support. So taking the effort out of sitting up, or the effort out of whatever your position is. Maybe grounding your feet. And if you're lying yourself down, I'm a big fan of cushions, blankets, anything kind of soft and cuddly. So I think, we don't breathe in isolation. Everything is interconnected. So if we can give ourselves other signals of safety while we're breathing, then it's all going to come together. So I've got who have I got today? I've got Panda today. This is my little stuffed panda. Pandas are my favorite animal. And if I'm feeling a bit overwhelmed, he'll often just sit on my lap. No one needs to know, except that you guys do now because I've just told you. So anything that you can do to make yourself feel a little bit more relaxed. If closing your eyes is helpful, you could allow your eyes to drift closed. Or if you prefer to keep them open, softening your gaze, maybe allowing it to rest on something that's just ahead of you. Relaxing your forehead, your jaw, allowing the shoulders to drop. Amazing how much tension we often feel in our shoulders. Again, if you notice tension in your belly, your ribs, maybe your hips, softening even just a little. Anywhere else that you notice tension, just softening a little. And this is your breath practice and your choice. So if at any point you start to feel uncomfortable, you can open your eyes, you can reach for something, you can move your attention elsewhere. But the most important thing is that we feel safe while we're doing this. So often holding something in your hand, whether it's something soft and squishy, or if it's something like a pebble, can be really helpful. So you might notice that as we've just allowed ourselves a moment to relax here, that suddenly you do feel a little bit of peace. Or maybe the opposite. Maybe it feels uncomfortable. And stillness and silence is a bit of a foreign concept to you, and it feels challenging. So just noticing that, if that is the case. We can bring our attention very gently to our breath here. Remember that there's no wrong thing to feel here. Anything that shows up is totally valid. And it's your choice. Pay attention to your breath as you notice it moving into the body and out. So we're not trying to control or change anything here. Just allowing. Let's bring a little bit of attention here to our breath. Noticing where you feel it. Is there a part of your body where you notice your breath here? Maybe your nostrils, your chest, your belly. Maybe somewhere else. Is it more on one side than the other? Does it feel free and easy? Do you feel tight, tense, fast, slow? Do things feel constricted or looser, freer? If you feel the need to move your body or shift your position, please feel free to do that. If your breath makes you feel a little bit uncomfortable, a little bit squirmy, or maybe you feel yourself sinking in and relaxing. So sometimes stillness isn't what we need, but sometimes it guides us towards what we do. So keeping this awareness on the breath if you can. If you do start to feel uncomfortable, remember this is your choice. If the mind wanders, bringing it back, again with that kindness, it's okay. Welcome back. And what you might find is that the breath has started to settle a little as we've been watching, as we've been sitting with it. But if that hasn't happened for you, that's okay. What you might like to do is to gently invite that breath a little bit lower. So if it's helpful, you could put your hand onto your belly, just allowing it to gently rest there. So mine's sitting just over my belly button, just resting. And allowing the breath a little deeper. You might find the belly very gently moving. Or you might find that hand on your belly is something that helps you to feel, to connect with yourself. Because we can't feel our diaphragm itself. But We can feel the belly moving as a result. So softly, gently, giving yourself time. If you start to feel tension or tightness or any discomfort, that's a sign to give yourself a break. Back off a little bit. So easing into this a tiny bit at a time. So remember those things that we're looking out for. If you notice things like saliva, that's a great sign. Tummy rumbles. Maybe you feel a little bit calmer. Maybe your mind is quieter. The breath slows. You feel tension dropping from the body just a little. Maybe you feel a yawn coming. Maybe you feel sleepy. So these are all signs that the body is starting to relax. If it's liking what you're doing. And if you're not getting those signs, be a little gentler. Sometimes this relaxation happens quite easily. Sometimes it takes a little bit longer. Or sometimes it takes a little bit longer to know exactly what we need. But it does get easier. So releasing any tension that you can, softening, inviting that breath lower. So let's take a few more breaths. And then allow yourself a moment. Let's just check in with how you feel in your body. So if there's anything that feels different, anything that's changed, anything that you noticed that came up. Maybe you noticed emotions coming up. That's very normal. And giving anything that's come up here space, knowing that it's okay to feel. Oh, it's okay to feel. It's okay to feel anything that's come up. So we can gently come back into our space, maybe having a very gentle wriggle, maybe a stretch or a yawn if that feels good to you. Or if you're feeling really peaceful and you want to stay where you are, you can do that as well. Um, it's, I'm a big fan of an overarm stretch and a wriggle after a breath practice. But sometimes we just want to stay where we are for a little bit longer if we've found a sense of peace. So take your time coming back into your space. And that was just a very sort of short kind of breath practice. And if that was the first time you've ever done anything like that, it might have felt quite weird. Or maybe it felt good, maybe it didn't. I think one of the most important things is that we find what works for us. So if diaphragm breathing there felt really difficult, then okay, how are we going to make it work for you? Is there a visualization that helps? Is putting our hands in different places going to help? Is there a way to release tension that will help? Can we lie you down? Can we sit you up? There's lots of different ways of doing it. So it's finding what works for you. So if you find that difficult, it doesn't mean it won't work for you. It just means we gotta find your way, I think. Yeah.
Thank you, Jackie.
Yeah,
Thank you.
and
That was
you're so right,
wonderful.
Joy. Mm. Yeah, it
Mm.
is easier to
Would
do it with
you,
someone.
yeah, would you
Yeah.
suggest, if it's fairly new to you, would you suggest maybe just doing a short practice a couple of times a day at,
Yeah. Less is
to
always
get
more,
used
right?
to it and to get, yeah, to get the brain
Yeah,
used to that you're doing it. Yeah.
exactly. Yeah. I mean, if we think about our diaphragm's a muscle. So
Mm.
if we start using a muscle that we've not used, it's going to be, it's like, going to the gym and being like, I've never lifted weights. I'm going to start with the big ones, which is obviously a terrible idea, right? So with the
Yes.
diaphragm, it's the same thing. If we're not used to diaphragm breathing and suddenly we're like, yeah, I'm going to diaphragm breathe 100% of the time, we've got to go in that gentle.
Slowly,
So,
gently, yeah.
it might be doing 5 minutes of it, or it might be doing 2 breaths.
Mm-hmm.
Meet yourself where you are. Does it feel good?
Mm-hmm.
And remember that the breath doesn't happen in isolation. So if you're doing a breath practice and you start to feel anxious, then what helps? Do you need a panda with weighted paws? He might be the answer. Uh, or are there other things that help you to feel safe? Do you like scented candles? Does that help? Do you like blankets? Do you like I've got this is a pebble here that I picked up on my favorite beach a few years ago, and it's the perfect kind of size to fit into my palm. And so it might be, are there things that make you feel a little bit more grounded, a little bit more safe, or is it the wrong breath practice for you in this moment? Is there something that would work better? Um, yeah, and yeah, Shan said in the chat, yeah, hand on heart, things like that. Yeah, absolutely. The sense of touch is so powerful, isn't it? So,
Mm.
what things help you to feel safe? And let's mix and match, right? um, totally.
Wonderful.
Yeah.
Thank you so much. Anyone else have any quick questions before we wind up? I'll make
I've got a
sure everyone
question.
gets the links. Yeah, Ali, is it? Hi, Ali.
Yeah, I would like to ask because for POTS, I have recommended belly binder or belly compression, but it feels to me that
Mm.
it will disturb the belly breathing or the diaphragm breathing. So I haven't done it yet, but what are the thoughts about this?
Good
Yeah, that's
question.
a really difficult one, isn't it? Because
Yes.
the blood pooling, I think it was someone I interviewed who was talking about this, and they said actually the blood pooling isn't mostly in the legs, it's mostly in the belly. Um, which is probably exactly why you've been suggested that. But yeah, if we constrict the belly, we constrict our breathing. So a lot of people, I mean, I am 100% guilty of this. Society tells us that we should be thinner. So we hold our bellies in order to appear thinner, right? If we do that, we're doing exactly the same thing. We're constricting our breathing, which is one of the reasons why lying down often feels a lot easier. So I think, yeah, I mean, it's probably one to discuss with your doctor because there's probably a balance.
Mm.
Um, you know, breathing into the belly is really important. So is there a way of using the compression, but so it's not too tight? Um, I'm not really sure about that one because I don't want to tell you not to do something you've been medically told to do. But yeah, I think, certainly being aware of what it does, if you're binding around your belly, your diaphragm is going to really struggle. And if you are breathing into your diaphragm, it's going to be hugely effortful. And if it's hugely effortful, then you're going to fatigue much easier. So, yeah, I'm not totally sure about it, but I would definitely be aware of what it's doing and see if you can strike a balance, maybe.
Mm.
See what they suggest, possibly. Um,
And
yeah, yeah, it's a
Claire's
challenge.
has a question.
Hi,
Thank
Yeah.
Jackie.
you.
That was a lovely exercise,
Hey.
really lovely. I'm just wondering for my parents group,
Mm.
what would be the youngest age of children that could do your course, and whether any of the ones that are older but are bedbound could do your course?
Yeah, so we've had teenagers. I think it depends very much on the child and the situation, of course. Um, but we do allow younger folk on, but what we do ask is that they're accompanied by, an adult or someone. Um, we've definitely had teenagers. I think there was someone who was about 13, 14 most recently, and he was great. He was there with his mum, and absolutely lovely. And it's nice that we have a kind of variety of ages because everyone learns from each other, and it's again that sense of community. But yeah, what we do say is anyone under the age of 18 needs to be accompanied, and which obviously does put the burden on someone, a parent or a carer or responsible adult of some
Mm.
description. But it's what it's the rules. um, so
And the
yeah, but yeah,
severity,
absolutely.
and the
Um,
severity of the bedbound
again,
could.
very much, yeah, very much sort of wide variety. We've had people who have shown up from bed, cameras off. Sometimes they'll type in the chat, sometimes they won't. And it's fine. People have challenging days, right? Sometimes you're having a camera off day, and
Mhm.
maybe every day is a camera off day, and that's totally fine. You can join from wherever you need to. And yeah, we've had people, because all the sessions are recorded, you can come along for part of the session and then catch the rest and catch up if you're not able to do the full session in a one hour. So we've tried to design it in a way that it is flexible as possible and as accessible as possible. And there was somebody who won't mind me saying this, did it in sort of 10-minute sections. So would sometimes come along for the first 10 minutes and then would digest the rest of each session in 10-minute sections and would send me questions by email. So this thing came up. What about that kind of thing if they weren't able to be there live and ask questions? So we do try to make it as accessible as possible for people because we get it.
Yeah, thank you.
Yeah.
No worries.
Okay, I think we should wind up now if everyone's okay. We'll get those links to all. If you once you send them to me, Jackie, I can pop it into our WhatsApp group for everyone. And
Perfect. Shall I just drop them in an email for you and then you can
yes, yeah, if you could,
yeah. I've
thank
just
you.
popped a few in the chat as
Yeah,
well, but again
yeah,
I totally appreciate
lovely.
copying stuff out of the chat is not always everyone's favorite thing.
Yeah.
Um
Yeah, so really appreciate you being here with us. And of course, I have to ask that question. You haven't seen the Loch Ness Monster, obviously.
I said I would find the picture, didn't I? There is a picture of me with the Loch Ness Monster. And
Yeah.
obviously it is totally your choice as to whether you believe this is real or not. But there we go. I've just popped that in the chat.
Where
Um,
where I live, we're always in search of an elusive tiger. So I really love these
ah,
stories of Loch Ness monsters and other creatures.
yeah, it's the magic, isn't it? I
Wonderful,
think it's that sense
yes.
of magic. Um, so yes, there we go. Um, yeah, Nikki's saying Nessie is there. I felt her presence. Yeah, yeah, there's definitely an element of every time I get in the water, you're kind of like, is she going to
Yeah,
come and nibble on my toes today, or is she going to save it for another time? But she's very friendly. She only eats a
gorgeous.
few tourists a year, so
Oh, that's good.
we keep her well
Okay.
fed.
Yeah, yes. All right. Okay, everyone. I'll just turn the
Oh,
recording off.
yeah. Thank you for having me.